This research article, titled Presence of Infotainment in Spain Mainstream Digital Television Channels, is part of a series of studies on infotainment that started at the end of the 80s in the United States. These studies have documented the evolution of television content in which the informational genres have fused with the entertainment and even the fictional genres, and have examined the expansion of this phenomenon on Western television channels, as a result of the development of commercial television and the need to develop strategies to attract the audience in a highly competitive market. Infotainment is manifested in three parallel ways. Firstly, in the incorporation of the so-called soft news within the traditional news programs. Secondly, in the tendency to address serious news issues within programs and formats whose primary object is to distract viewers. And finally, in the emergence of programs dedicated to parody current affairs. Our study found out that these forms of infotainment have ignorant identifying traits. These articles have three main objectives. First, to identify the characteristic features of the infotainment television phenomenon. Second, to analyze the programming schedules of Spain mainstream DTT channels to identify the degree of penetration of infotainment across the different networks. And thirdly, to analyze the content of the primetime programs offered by these channels to identify the main features of infotainment. To achieve these objectives, we combine quantitative and qualitative methods. First, we perform a national and international literature review to establish the definition and characteristics of infotainment television. The analysis focuses on four aspects: the thematic selection, the choice and treatment of information sources, the recording, editing and broadcasting technical details, and finally, the narrative style. The analysis of the presence of infotainment in the main Spanish DTT channels is based on the programming schedules of the two mainstream public television channels, TVE 1 and 2, and the four main private networks, Telecinco, Antena 3, La Sexta y 4. The quantitative analysis of the schedules focus on obtaining the total weekly time dedicated by a channel to infotainment programming. The period of time during which the programming was examined was 15 to 21 of April 2013, which is a randomly chosen week with no special programming features. This empirical analysis provided quantitative data about the number of hours devoted by Spanish television to infotainment, which allow us to establish differences across channels and between public and private broadcasting corporations. We finally performed a content analysis of the primetime infotainment programs broadcast by the sample of channels to identify which of the variables are more common in Spanish television. The main findings of the study include the following. Infotainment occupies a prominent position on the programming schedules on the main Spanish mainstream DTT channels. The total time devoted to it per week is 153 hours and 58 minutes. La Sexta is by far the channel with the highest percentage of infotainment, 24.91%. Telecinco follows in second position with 22.66%. Opposing the hypothesis, TVE 1 occupies the third position with similar percentage to Antena 3, slightly over 18%. Although TVE 1 does not compete in advertising with the other channels, its effort to legitimize itself with an attractive programming offer makes it to follow a programming strategy similar to that of the private channels. TVE 2 distances itself from the trend, since it only dedicates 80.12% to this type of content. Infotainment is especially abundant in the morning and the prime time slots. In the morning hours, infotainment is presented in magazine shows whose foundation is the analysis of current affairs through informative pieces, interview and talk sections, in which these affairs are mixed with more banal information, gossip and celebrity news or curiosities. Competition among networks causes an emulation of formats. The study effectively verified that in the morning time, the sample of 6 channels opts for the magazine show format and in the primetime slot for the debate, the reporting and satire. genres that require less investment than fiction, documentary, docu-comedy, or comedy shows. The study confirmed the presence of most of the characteristic features of infotainment programs in the primetime programming of the 6 channels: controversial topics, incorporation of comedy and parody, or the importance granted to the presenter who offers his personal view to the narration of the events. Technically, the number of resources used is very large and aimed at increasing the spectacularity of images, use of high-angle post-production effects, sound effects, and dramatic music. The research article is part of the project called Political Infotainment on Television and the Internet: Formats, Audiences, and Consequences in Spain's Political Communication. This wider project has been funded by the Ministry of Education, Culture and Sports and directed by Professor Salomé Berrocal from the University of Valladolid.